Hey, welcome back to That's Not Proper, and I'm your host, Corey Assumption. Hey there. Okay, so if you had listened to my last episode called Homeschool Was Not on My Agenda Part 1, you would have heard that I had planned to do a few episodes with regards to homeschooling because I myself have been a homeschool parent for not quite, but almost 25 years. I am not an expert. I still have things I'm learning on a regular basis, but I do have some experience under my belt. And I thought during this time, it might be good to contribute what I do know and how I can help to those who are out there who have all of a sudden been thrust into this whole homeschool situation as far as, their kids are home from daycare, their kids are home from school, and they just really don't know what to do with themselves. So for today's episode, what I'm going to be focusing on is a little bit more for the younger ones. I'm going to split these episodes up a little bit. So today we're going to be talking about the younger ones a little bit more than we will be talking about the older ones. And by we, obviously, I mean me. The first thing I think is really important as a parent is that you are able to find some time and some space for yourself. That time and space I know is limited. I have been there. I have done that. I have had the child on my leg, in my arms, in my belly, on my boob, screaming in another room, destroying the other room. I understand. It is very difficult. However, find that time, even if it's just one moment, to take a few breaths in and a few breaths out. Take that time where you can find it. If it means staying up 5 minutes later, waking up 5 minutes earlier, please do that. In addition to that, it is really helpful. I don't know why. I'm sure there's some sort of psychology behind it. Really helpful to get dressed in the morning. Now, that dressing might be putting on the exact same pair of sweatpants or pajamas that look like the ones you just slept in all night. Doesn't matter. Take off the old ones, put on some new, splash some water on your face, brush your teeth, pull your hair back, brush it back, whatever it is, grab a cup of coffee. Whatever you can do for yourself for those 5 moments, whatever it is, do it. It does really make a difference. In addition to that, communication with your partner. Today, we're going to be discussing a few tips and tricks I have when they're home, and especially during this time when people are kind of like, dear sweet God, I have no idea what to do. Regardless of the age of your child, creating a space, I think, is something that's helpful. I wasn't always able to do this with my kids because there were so many. It was basically the kitchen table. And if that's all you've got, then use it. But if you're able to create a space that is theirs, that you designate for them, that you tell them, hey, this is your space, I highly suggest that. Even if it's a towel on the ground with TV tray or something like that, but an area that is just theirs. They've been taken from an environment where they felt like they had a space, whether it was a desk at school or a table at school or a chair at school, and they don't have that anymore. And yes, your home environment should be very welcoming anyhow. They should feel safe there, but it is still this great change. So creating a space that's just for them. It does not need to be a huge space. It doesn't need to be a huge room, but just an area that is designated for them. I highly suggest that for all ages, so that they know where they can go to draw or do school or to read or spend some time meditating or thinking, whatever it is, that is their specific space for that. Now, last episode, what I had discussed was journaling and consent and sex education. For all ages, journaling is amazing. It allows a child so many ways to communicate their feelings, and it can be done not just by writing, but by drawing. How are you feeling today? Draw me a picture. What's your happy face? What's your sad face? Whatever it is, allow them to express themselves through that. It also opens up communication because then you can talk to them about what's in their journal. Now, for the older ones, I suggest giving them the option of even sharing their journal. They may want to write in that journal the way that they're feeling. Maybe they're very artsy and they want to draw in there, but they aren't really ready to share it just yet, and give them that space. But it allows them to express what they're feeling in an art form as well as a writing form. And I think it's really helpful for them. It also continues to allow their minds to keep working. Okay, so there are a plethora of really great resources online for someone who's homeschooling or home educating. And again, I know that you guys aren't necessarily doing this 100% 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, but during this time, a website that is really great is called allinonehomeschool.com, spelt like it sounds, allinonehomeschool.com. They also have allinOneHighSchool.com. And that is actually a full curriculum for preschool all the way through high school. So the preschool one all the way through, I believe it's 8th grade, is allinonehomeschool.com. And for the high school, it is allinOneHighSchool.com. So for those of you who are wondering what to do during this time, those two websites are really great for all ages. Another website that is really great for a little bit for more older children. Actually, I take that back. They do ages 2 through 18. It's called Khan Academy, KHAN Academy.org. They're a nonprofit organization, and they have a ton of information for all ages and education. And it's really great. Actually, I use it several times for my kids for math, struggling with math. I am absolutely 100% terrible at math. And so this website was great because they had like a teacher doing a video, and it was really easy to understand and comprehend for my kids instead of me, who knows absolutely nothing sometimes about math. Just a quick side note, just so you know, both of those websites and their programs that they offer are totally free. So for someone who's in a situation where they can't afford to put money out for some of these websites that I know that I'm seeing on Facebook and social media and things like that that cost, these two sites that I'm sharing with you are 100% free. In season 1 of this podcast, I had 2 different episodes. One of them was called Create Rebels with Intent. The other was Embrace the Insanity. And those 2 had to do with, 1, creating children that rebel and question things that we're taught are traditions and norms, but that actually are harmful to ourselves and to our society. And then Embrace the Insanity focused on the idea that, look, there is no way to predict how things are going to go. Here's a perfect example. Here we are in this shelter-in-place, quarantine, whatever you want to call it. Nobody had any idea that something like this could happen. And so here we're in a situation where we have to figure out if we're going to succumb to the insanity or if we're going to embrace the insanity. So I highly suggest you go back and listen to those episodes. But as far as right now, what I suggest for our children, starting from ages, well, really when they can communicate up until around the age of 12, use everything. Okay, and here is what I mean by that. One thing that's difficult to convey to children in actual traditional school environments is, practical skills for everyday life. Nothing wrong with schools and how they educate. It's just something that they're not actually able to always convey when you've got 30 kids in a classroom or whatever it is. And at home, there are things that we have to do day to day. And some of us probably can reflect on this and realize, you know what, I didn't really learn this in school. I had to learn it myself, or I learned it because my mother was doing it and I watched her, or my father was doing it and I watched him. And so there are things that we can teach that are actually educational, that can be a contribution to their education from home, that are a little bit more like life skills. And so when I say use everything, that means use everything in your day-to-day life, in your home, as a way to educate your child. As I said, I'm going to be focusing on some more of the younger years. And what I mean by younger years, I would say up to maybe age somewhere between 10 and 12. Really depends on where your child is at right now in school. So I would say up to the ages of 10 and 12. So this includes some of the younger ones. And obviously some of these things that you are going to have to alter a little bit based on their abilities as far as their fine motor skills and if they can or cannot read and things like that. But all of these things can actually be used from a very young age all the way up to around 11 or 12. And so one of the first things I suggest when I'm talking about things from home are simple things like, okay, say today you decide you're going to make pancakes. You don't have to make pancakes. It can be cereal. I don't care what it is. Let's say you're making breakfast, and let's just take pancakes for an example. When you get the pancakes, what you're going to do with your child is have them get everything out. Now, if it's a box of Bisquick, fine. If it's the flour and the sugar and everything else that's needed to make the pancakes, have them retrieve those things from the pantry. Have them find out the exact measurements for what you need to make. Now, for example, in my household, I have to double or triple a recipe because there's so many. So that requires them then to use math. Now, if they're younger, you can just tell them, okay, we need to do this 1/4 of a cup, find the 1/4 of a cup measuring cup, and then we need to do this 3 times, and we count 1, 2, 3. Now, with the older ones, they're going to have to use math, and you could pull out a sheet of paper and have them do the math right there for you. Now, then the next thing is putting the ingredients together. So they're going to be putting the ingredients together. Have them take note and observe, especially the younger ones, what is happening. Have them verbally say it to you. Encourage them to use their words. Ask them, what's happening right now? Does it look different? Does it feel different? What happens when you stir it? Are there different colors in here? It just helps keep their minds working. In addition to that, what a lot of people may not realize is baking and cooking has a science component to it. There is a science to it. Chemical reactions occur when baking and cooking. And so when you're doing these things, have them take note and observe. Now, for the younger ones, what you can actually do is take your phone and have them, say into the phone what they're observing, and it's going to, hold on to that recording for you. For the older ones, have them write it down. Have it be very specific and detailed if you'd like. Then when you add those pancakes to the griddle or waffles, whatever you're doing, and what happens to it then, what is the change then? See how it rises, see how it bubbles, see how it heats up, see how it gets crusty on the outsides. Have them note those things and observe those things. Then from there, what you can do, there is a plethora of YouTube videos and different things online where you can actually find out the science behind things like baking and cooking, pancakes, whatever it is, what exactly is happening to what you are doing from a scientific standpoint. So now what you've covered, and you may not realize, is you have covered math, you've covered reading, you've covered science, all in this episode of you making breakfast for the family. Now, this is just an example, but what you can see from this is taking things that you do every day at home that maybe the kids aren't necessarily aware of or a part of, and making them become a part of your now community. This is your community. It was before, but it's even more so now. And so now they're contributing to the community as well as educating and learning some life skills that are really important that a lot of times our kids just don't learn in a natural school environment. I'm sure there's some of you out there that probably have your favorite cooking shows on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime or whatever. But one of my favorites used to always be Good Eats with Alton Brown. The reason why I loved him and how it can be used for education as well is because he explains not only how to make these recipes and how to make them taste good, but he explains why the ingredients interact the way that they do from a scientific standpoint. So you're also getting some science education in there as well. So if you can find some of those episodes to incorporate with that, that would be great for your student as well. I use cooking a lot as an example for a lot of things because, well, as parents, we do a lot of that. And I'm certain that we're finding we're doing a whole lot more of that now than we used to. For myself, because I stay at home, I'm doing it all the time. But I know a lot of parents now because they're not working or having to cook, and they didn't really have to do this before. So let's get the kids involved. And one other thing you can teach them, and this can start from a very young age all the way up to, like I said, 12, is nutrition facts. It's something that we haven't really paid too much attention to. I think especially as Americans, we kind of just eat till we're full and then that's it. It's really important to take a look at these things for various reasons, but it can also be used as an education tool. It can be used in the idea of math. When you find out, okay, what is the guideline? Let's say it's 2,000 calories a day, and let's pay attention to what we've eaten and let's document it through the day and see how many calories we've eaten. You could break it down to the macronutrients as well, as far as like fibers and proteins and things like that. But teaching them how to read these nutrition labels is really important. Now, in our household, it's something we've had to do from a very early age because I have type 1 diabetics, so I have to pay attention to the carb count on absolutely everything that is ever eaten by these kids. So what you can do, though, is use that as a tool for science. You can use it as a tool for math. You can use it as a tool for reading, and it works all the way up through the age of 12. Now, for the younger ones that are not reading yet, you can still incorporate it and tailor it to their understanding. And you can show them the numbers, and we can discuss what number that is. We can write those numbers down. See what I I mean by using that and tailoring it to your child's age while still educating them? In addition to that, they're learning something that is a life skill and something that can possibly contribute to the family as a community. Another creative idea that you can use actually for the entire family, but in addition to that, your 7 to 9-year-olds, is the idea of a time capsule, putting things in some type of container, a coffee can or whatever, that have to do with what's going on here and now, or something maybe that's important to them that they don't mind getting rid of for a while, and saving that for 10 years. A friend of mine, Christine, who used to be a 4th grade teacher. And something she did, and I thought this was fabulous, I loved this idea, is she had her 4th grade students, so that is the age range from 7 to 9, depending upon where your kid's at, and she would have them write a letter to themselves. And in that letter, they would talk about their day or what's going on or what they hope their future would be, in 10 years from that point. You can have your children do the exact same thing, write a letter to themselves. They can talk about what's going on right now in the world and the quarantine, or what's happening in their day, and then what they think maybe is going to happen in the next 10 years for themselves. Then you seal that letter up and you give it back to them in 10 years. And I thought that was a really fabulous, fun idea and thing to do for your children. And the thing you won't have to do that Christine had to do was hunt down these kids 10 years later and find out where they live, because obviously they're your kids. You'll know where they're at. Okay, some of you have children that are maybe considered high strung. And what I found with the ones that I had that were a little bit more high strung, it wasn't because they were out of control. It wasn't because they couldn't necessarily be focused. It's because I needed to find what their desires were and what their focus need to be. One thing that I found that works for some children that struggle in this area is tearing things apart. Now, I don't mean just give them, the living room to destroy with a bat. What I mean is find an old appliance, like an old radio, an old vacuum, something old. Give them a couple tools, a couple different types of screwdrivers, a small hammer, whatever. Obviously age appropriate, supervise this. You don't want them to hurt themselves, but have them take it apart. Every single solitary piece. Obviously, if it's an electric appliance, please do not have it plugged in. Let's be safe, people. But have them tear this thing apart. You'd be amazed how well this works for some children. Having to unscrew each and every screw and seeing what's on the inside and taking each piece apart and finding out how these things all work together. And then you can go even further, especially if you find that they're enjoying this, finding YouTube videos that talk about the components of something like a radio or a vacuum or whatever, something that they can take apart. It really helps for some children to find a way to focus very specifically on something that is different maybe than everybody else is doing. And again, this isn't something they would typically be doing in a school situation, but it is something they can do at home. In addition to that, it helps keep them, from getting all crazy. It helps for them to work on their fine motor skills. It helps them to work on problem solving, all those types of things. It's a really great way. And you can do this when they're really little, but I highly suggest some really excessive supervision with regards to the tools and things like that. Okay, now exercise. Obviously, there's things you can do, tell your kid to run around, do jumping jacks, do somersaults, that kind of stuff when, they're certain ages. But a lot of our kids like to get out maybe on their bikes or play basketball or something like that, something a little bit more outdoor and active. And the thing is some of those things still can be done. It may just have to be tailored to guidelines as far as social distancing and staying within the boundaries of your home. For example, where we're at, we are in a shelter in place. Our shelter in place is up until May 3rd at this point right now. However, I can still go for a walk as long as I practice social distancing with regards to other people around me. I can still go on a bike ride, which honestly is an excellent way to get some exercise and keep your distance from other people, because you're not walking, you're not going to be bumping into anyone when you're on a bicycle. But in addition to that, playing basketball, running around the backyard, on a skateboard within the confines of your area where you can supervise them is still things that can be done. You just have to tailor it, encourage them that it's okay to get out there, but we need to be wise about how we're getting out there. But if you're looking for ways, because the weather's a little bit odd where we're at right now, like we have a warm day today, but I know it's supposed to rain here for the next 4 days. So getting outside is not going to be quite as easy. And so things that you can do are using different programs within inside your home. Now, there's obvious things. Like I said, you can get a couple of your kids up together and it's a competition. Who can do the most jumping jacks, push-ups, sit-ups, whatever it is. How about the most crunches? Who can hold a plank the absolute longest? But there's a few great apps, and some of them can be mirrored to your television, like if you have an iPhone. And one of them is Down Dog. Now, Down Dog normally is a pay-for subscription after their trial period, but they're actually doing something right now where it is free for people up to a certain date. And I believe it's even longer if you are a student or if you are a teacher. So look into those things, because Down Dog's great because they have yoga. They have yoga for beginners. They have 7-minute workouts. They have HIIT workouts. They have all this great stuff, and that you can tailor it to your level, beginner, advanced, intermediate, for example. It has music and things like that. But they are excellent ways to incorporate some exercise where maybe you as a parent don't necessarily have to sit there and teach some of your kids these things because somebody else is teaching them. And obviously these things are a little bit better for those that are a little bit older. With the younger ones, exerting energy, gosh, things that I suggest are getting down on the floor and wrestling with them, playing around with them. Sometimes when you're doing workouts, they want to get down and they want to do the exact same thing as mom or dad. I highly encourage that. Get competitive with it. Okay, who can beat mom at, XYZ, or who can beat dad at XYZ, whatever it is. Different ways to encourage community with your family, and as well as encourage some exercise and helping them to exert that energy that's kind of being bundled up right now because they can't get out in the exact same way that they used to. One thing that I do here at home sometimes when I'm not able to actually get away from the house, and this is even prior to the whole shelter in place thing, is I walk my backyard. I pop my headphones on and I either have music in or I listen to a podcast or something like that. It kind of helps distract me for like going in circles repetitively because it's such a small area. But I'm able to do that, and there are times where I'm doing 2-3 miles because I get so caught up in a podcast or I get so caught up in the music or whatever it is while I'm walking. That's another thing to encourage, especially some of the older ones, to do. Yes, I know that normally we're telling everybody to limit our TV time or limit the internet time, and I understand doing that, although I do think at this point in time, with everything that's going on, I wouldn't be hyper-focused on that at this point. While we're on the topic of internet, there's one more website that I suggest, and it is explore.org, explore.org, and at the top of their website, it says education, and you can click on that and it'll take you to an area where you can choose different lesson plans. What's cool about this website is they also have live cams in different areas of the world of different animals. So for the younger ones, this could be really cool. They have lions and tigers and bears and birds, and even domestic animals like cats and dogs. Now, these are just some tips and tricks. There's a million other things that can be done. I'm just hopeful that some of these things are things that you can incorporate with your children as far as education, day-to-day life, learning about life skills and how to communicate with each other, as well as working as a community within your own home. All of these ideas being said, I highly suggest, if you can't do education with your kids at home right now, just take this time to rest, to relax, to try to not focus too much on things that may be fears or worries, to come together as a family and communicate well. But if you cannot focus on school right now, really long-term effect, not that severe. The health and safety of your children are far more important than anything that education can provide right now. Thank you so much for listening to That's Not Proper. Please tune in for the next episode where I'm going to be focusing a little bit more on junior high and high school age kids. It's a difficult age, and I'm aware of that. You have a lot more to deal with when you're talking about now these little adults and personalities and attitudes and all that kind of stuff. So be tuned in for the next episode of That's Not Proper. And while you have a chance, take a look at my website, that'snotproper.com. Sign up for the newsletter and check me out on Instagram and Facebook at That's Not Proper.